Before I announce the next speakers, because we're really tight on time, there's a very short 3-minute video I believe is ready to roll, so hopefully that will happen.
Back in July 2005, when the president of the International Olympic Committee, Jacques Rogge, announced that London would host the 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games, it was hard to believe that a hugely neglected part of the UK's capital city would be at the centre of the world's greatest sporting celebration. What of today though, the start of 2012? Well, you don't have to imagine anymore.
From the air, the transformation is clear. The Olympic Park, with its 21st century venues, its waterways, parklands and wetlands, sparkles like a jewel in the east of London. At its heart, the 80,000 capacity Olympic Stadium. The turf's down, the track's down, the huge screens are installed, and work continues to make sure that everything is ready for the spectacular opening and closing ceremonies and the thrilling weeks of track and field athletics. It is of course here that the Olympic torch will arrive after the 10-week relay around the entire country. The stadium is surrounded by water on 3 sides and accessed by 5 new bridges. The bridges will give the tens of thousands of daily visitors easy access to the many venues that surround the stadium, including the Aquatic Centre, Zaha Hadid's spectacular architectural roof making it perhaps the most iconic venue on the park. It has a new neighbour, the temporary water polo arena. Inside the Aquatic Centre, work is complete and testing continues both in the training pool and in the sensational main and diving pools. These Olympic and Paralympic standard facilities will be left behind as part of the extraordinary legacy of the Games. To the north of the stadium is the Copper Box. It's where handball will be played, and it will remain a 6,000-seat arena for sport and concerts after London 2012. But it's not just handball that will take place here. Elements of the modern pentathlon and goalball is one of the exciting Paralympic sports that this gleaming venue will also host. Beyond the International Broadcast Centre and the main press centre that will house 20,000 of the world's media are the 2 brand new hockey pitches that will form the Riverbank Arena when complete. Their unique selling point is obvious. They are the first pitches to have a striking blue playing surface. The colour is not just dramatic, it helps both the players and spectators pick out the new style yellow hockey ball much more easily. Many of the 4,000 new trees and 500,000 new plants are growing to the east of the Riverbank Arena in the North Parklands. Just by the River Lee, one of a number of giant live sight screens will be sited during the Games, allowing visitors to watch the events in a stunning landscape. Overlooking the parklands is the Olympic and Paralympic Village. 23,000 athletes and officials will stay there during the Games, and afterwards it's home to a whole new community. There are 11 blocks, all with communal areas, shops and local medical facilities. Next to it, the basketball arena. This is one of the park's temporary venues that will be taken down after the Games and recycled or reused elsewhere. Basketball has already hosted a fantastically successful test event. The first sporting venue to have building works completed on the park was the Velodrome, a real showcase of British design and construction that will benefit the community long after the Games have gone. Outside, the rip-roaring BMX track has been completed. To the north of the Velodrome, Eton Manor, site of the historic start of construction for the Olympic Park. Today though, it's a brand new venue for wheelchair tennis and also training swimming pools for the Games. After 2012, these will be transformed into an invaluable local sports centre for hockey, five-a-side football and tennis. And as if this vast park wasn't enough, the events for London 2012 spread throughout the capital at 18 other venues such as Excel, the North Greenwich Arena, Hadley Farm, Horse Guards Parade and Greenwich Park, where test events continue to be held. The sheer scale of London 2012 is enormous and the excitement palpable.
The transformation has been breathtaking, the effort involved Olympia. Now with days and months to go rather than years until the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games, final preparations are underway to make sure that everything is just right at the moment when the eyes of the world are on that stadium, the lighting of the Olympic flame to signal the start of the Games of the 30th Olympiad.
Our conference theme is the sustainability learning legacy, and we've adapted the Olympic theme of the learning legacy. But who better to tell us about that is Simon Wright. Simon is the Director of Infrastructure and Utilities at the Olympic Delivery Authority. He's responsible for the delivery of the infrastructure of that. Please welcome Simon Wright.
Right, thank you very much. I will try to be brief. There's a lot to get through, but we'll zip through the slides and see how we get on. So, of course, you all remember, I expect, that day back in July 2005 when London was awarded the Olympic Games. A pretty, perhaps unexpected success, but nevertheless one that was very welcome by many of us. I was in a different job entirely at the time, but decided, along with others, that this was something I really, really wanted to get involved with and was successful in doing so and have enjoyed it immensely. So it's been a very rewarding 6 years. Of course, we all go back to the start of the race. This is the 100 meters final in Beijing, the first Olympics I'd been to at least, and this was in the Bird's Nest Stadium, which had had a lot of good media about the architecture and the stunning visual impact of it. And of course, you then come down to the sport itself, and Usain Bolt won the 100 meters by about two yards. He cruised through and won the race in absolutely stunning style. It was a mesmerizing and sort of iconic event, and brought it all home to us as to what this was about. But back to the beginning. The Olympics is sort of the world's largest event, and does include an enormous number of people. Sort of 22,000 media is the one figure that sticks in my mind. There seem to be more media than athletes, which is always a bit of an alarming prospect, but of course, huge television audience as well. So it is a very big deal, and there's lots of organizations involved. We're the blue box down there. We're a public body. We are paid, our bills are paid by the government and by lottery funding, but there is LOCOG, London Organising Committee, who are the private sector funded body who actually run the games. So we build the infrastructure, they run the show. And the EAUC are the people who license the whole thing. So where is it? Those of you not so familiar with London, it's to the east of the city. It's in an area of otherwise previously underdeveloped land, almost no investment for probably 50 or 100 years, and a lots of area of deprivation and contamination. So we inherited a site that was heavily polluted, contaminated, had some industries on it, had about 200 buildings on it, some viable industries, some pretty sort of moribund industries, and one or two actually university halls of residence, strangely, which were unoccupied. When we knocked them down, they were anyway. This was the site at the beginning, 2005, so low-lying, river valley, low-level buildings, 1- and 2-story generally, lots of railways and rivers, quite a complex site, bisected by existing infrastructure, and really sort of fairly dysfunctional as a piece of city. So the first thing was to develop a master plan. Now, our interest as a public body is not only in the Olympic Games, but more profoundly in the long-term reinvestment, the regeneration of this area for the long-term benefit of the local residents. And so our master plan was focused on the legacy, the end game, the next 25 years, as well as on the short term of the Olympics. And we were very careful to try and build in the future proofing from the outset. We had very clear program, as you'd expect from a project management-based company, and we published these quite extensively so people could see and measure us against the targets. One of the lessons learned, by the way, is as public bodies, working in the most transparent way you can actually has significant benefits. We should never be afraid of being transparent. But not only did we want to build it on time and on budget, it's actually quite important to build an Olympics on time, because when you say you're going to run the Olympics in 2012, it generally does have to be in 2012 and not 2013. So that was kind of quite important. Sticking to the budget was also important because the country was going quietly bankrupt in 2007, and therefore there was no more money. But also we thought we'd do things in a slightly different way to show a bit of leadership, to show that the construction industry can actually change and do things smarter and more efficiently. And as previous speakers have said, you've got to set out your stall and show an example. So we picked on a number of what we call priority themes, and of course sustainability was one of them. Health and safety was another, was always top of the list. It's quite important not to kill people when you're building things, I think. We're the first Olympics, touch wood, that hasn't killed anybody so far. Quite salutary, I think. So, sustainable development. Well, what were we trying to do? This was, we're a bunch of builders, and what was this all about? So we hired people like Richard, who's going to talk next, to come and tell us what this is all about. So we set a number of very tough targets. You need to be measurable. You need to actually understand what the metrics are. So renewable energy, but overall reduction in carbon, 50% reduction in carbon from all the Olympic facilities in the legacy. And that was done in a number of ways I'll come on to. Transport, using low-carbon transport, rail and river is better than road for obvious reasons. Don't chuck the waste away. When you demolish things, don't chuck it away. Use it on site. Incorporate it into the buildings. And water, we have to use less water. And this year it's even more important than ever. And then buildings have to be efficient. They have to run efficiently. Excuse me. So we developed a new BREEAM rating, and we required all buildings to be BREEAM excellent. There was no BRE measure for sports buildings, so we developed one with BRE. Procurement, bit of a busy slide, but really what this is trying to say is we embedded those targets into the design from the outset. It's no good bolting things on later in the game. You've got to get designers to incorporate from the very beginning when they're tendering. So consultancies tendered on the basis of meeting those targets. They built those into the designs, and then contractors knew what they were required to implement and deliver, and the contractors were required to provide performance measures against those targets from the outset. And we checked that they did, we verified it, we assured it, and we had an independent assessor, the Commission for Sustainable London, to make sure we were behaving ourselves and not telling porcupines. Lots of tenders, lots of British companies, quite a lot of SMEs. We tried to involve SMEs wherever we could. And we did deliver it on time and on budget. So what was it all about? The first set of works we called enabling works, rather a drab title for a quite exciting project. We had several thousands of fridges to get rid of. We had overhead high voltage cables to bury because, well, not the pylons, we buried the cables. But these were a massive eyesore running up and down the Lee Valley. You couldn't develop with these in the way, so we put high voltage cables underground, visual impact removed. And then we demolished these various buildings, University Hall of Residence on that side, and we reused the materials. So over 90, in fact, we got 98% of all the waste materials were reused on the park, incorporated into the new works. Archaeology, this was, amazingly enough, this is an archaeological investigation. I think it's the largest archaeological hole I've ever seen, at the bottom of which is a sort of medieval roadway. But this was 12 meters deep in recent fill, so quite a big exercise to dig and to measure and not to let it hold us up. We want to map the past, respect the history, but we had to keep on program. Contaminated land was one of our biggest problems, an enormous issue in brownfield development. The cost of this is significant and puts off a lot of private sector development. It can only really be dealt with in a comprehensive manner, which an Olympics allows you to do, because we inherited a very large piece of real estate. So take the soil, crush it all up, stick it in a big washing machine, and produce reusable materials. Don't take it all off to landfill. So something like 80% of all the material was reused. These sands and gravels on this side are reusable in the works. You don't have to take those to landfill. The 20% you do have to take to landfill today still. I hope in the future that will be changed. But we're up now to really a very small proportion to be taken off-site. Utilities, of course, are enormously important with carbon reduction. And we focused on sort of 3 steps. First of all, we wanted really efficient utility systems. So generate on-site, don't allow high voltage losses to be part of your development scenario. So tri-generation on site, CHP, combined cooling, heat and power, operated through a concession contract. We went out to the private sector, we tendered a 40-year concession, they put the money in. So why should the public sector pay for this when we can get the private sector to do it? So we built 2 energy centres on the park, one covering the Olympic Park, one covering Stratford City, the yellow area there, and we interlinked them for resilience. So why build only one when we could build 2? Because one breaks down, you can use the heat from the other one. And it's quite a big CHP. It's a very big CHP, actually, probably the biggest in the country. Here it is. That's the new building going up, completed. We spent quite a bit of time and effort on the architecture. There's no reason why utility buildings have to look ugly. So we employed good architects, or at least the concessionaire did. And that's what we put in. We've got biomass boilers. We've got gas engines where we take the waste heat off of the cooling jacket. And we've got absorption chillers. And we produce chilled water and hot water. It's very efficient, much more efficient than an off-park major sort of old-fashioned type power station. Heat networks run around the park, heating and cooling pipes. If you're doing one of these, many of you probably have them on your campuses, you'll know that actually the pipes are pretty huge. These, the cooling pipes are bigger than the heating pipes. So you've got to, in a new development, you've got to allow space in the street. And they have these big expansion loops which stick out at 90 degrees to the pipe, which add even more space to the street. So build in the design from the outset. High voltage electricity, again, think about private wire networks, more efficient, more cost effective. Ours was actually slightly too large for private wire, but we did do a self-lay agreement and then got investment from the host network operator. Foul sewage. Obviously, we need new systems, but again, why make pumping stations boring? These pink tanks are carbon filters. They're rather crazily called Pinky and Perky by the building workers, so quite an iconic feature of the Olympic Park. Respect the past. So this is a print on concrete of Bazalgette's old 1850, 1860 sewer pumping station. So reflecting the past on the present. Lots of bridges, because we've got lots of canals. Bridges over canals, bridges over railways, interesting bridges, fairly sophisticated bridges, some temporary bridges. Why build permanent when you can build temporary and reuse? We didn't want to cover this waterway. This is a games time feature. Which is very wide because you have a very big crowd in the games trying to get across the canals. But in the long term, you don't want to cover up the waterways. You want them to be open to the sunshine. So in the long term, that coloured matting all comes away. Underside of that bridge, quite an interesting stainless steel panelled facade. The mat on the surface is made from recycled training shoes. And that is all temporary, comes away in the long term, opens up the waterways to the light to allow the boats to come back through the canals. Again, bridges using recycled materials. All these gabings are made with recycled concrete from the park, within which are bird and bat boxes. This is a bird box, I believe. Is that right? Not a bat box, bird box. So, you know, don't use imported materials, use waste materials. Don't take the concrete off site and pay to bring back new materials. Just use what you have. Adapt your designs to use the waste that you have available. Temporary and permanent. So, that's right. The bridge on the left-hand side is temporary. The bridge on the right-hand side is permanent. So we can take away and reuse those temporary spans, open up the river to make sure that the environment has the most light in the long term. New parks, new plants, new trees, ecology, parks for people, but parks for animals and wildlife. Also for flood storage, because we have major rivers passing through the park, so we're using these wetlands for not only cleaning up the water quality, but also providing online flood storage, so the water can well out into the flood areas get cleaned up by the reeds, but then also provides a bit of storage. So it's a great new space you saw in the film. Swales, sustainable urban drainage sods, using check dams from recycled granite curbs from the old London streets. So those little check dams you see coming down the swale, that swale will be grown with reeds and plants using the old granite to provide the check dams. Art, don't plonk art in the park, incorporate it within the infrastructure. This is recycled CDs forming the deck of a bridge. Also, it's art. Temporary buildings. Well, sorry, this is art as well, believe it or not. I have no opinion about the orbit. I'm not allowed one. We didn't pay for it, I'm glad to say. Nobody here from Mittal, are they? No. Excuse me. So the stadium. This was the site of the stadium. Lots of buildings, sensitively rehoused. We wanted to preserve the industries. So, they weren't just raised from the ground and chucked out the gate. We found new premises for them near the park. Want to preserve jobs in the local vicinity. Many of them did reasonably well. I think some of them did very well out of the move. Obviously, it's not a happy experience, but one that is least unhappy. New stadium coming up, double quick style, built to be demountable. We didn't know what the end user might want, so we built it so it could be demountable in games time. Aquatics has 2 wings. Zip through these. By the way, these are Zaha Hadid. If you know Zaha Hadid, quite a famous architect in Britain, she designs quite iconic and very complex buildings, and these diving boards were her design. Incredibly difficult to build out of in-situ concrete. You get one chance to pour that concrete, and it's got to be right. Temporary wings. Don't build what you don't need permanently. Build temporarily what you don't need permanently and make it reusable or recyclable. So these temporary wings are probably going to go off to Rio to be used in the Rio Games. 17,000 seats, temporary stand, build it so you can demount it and reuse it. So those 2 wings come away, the central section is left in the long term, because we don't need a 17,000 seat swimming pool in London in the long term. We only need a 3,000 seat swimming pool. Copper box, recycled copper, very flexible, very reusable, highly efficient. Those are light pipes. So this is all sunlight. Don't use artificial light in sports halls when you can use natural light. Why on earth are we paying to have these lights on when we could have daylight in here? So make use of technology like this. Very simple, very easy. Looks like an artificial light, but actually is a light pipe. Temporary basketball, make it reusable. Demount it. PVC, not a great material for some of us and for environmentalists, but we developed a new product which was phthalate-free PVC, one that can be recycled as well. And we developed this with Ferrari, the manufacturer. That's a goose. Can't remember why it's there now, actually. By the way, you've got a lot of geese here. Does anybody know how to get rid of geese? Because we've got them on the park. Anybody from the university? Foxes? Yeah, I'm going to say they haven't succeeded yet, but so we've got the same problem. Basketball inside, looks a great stadium, temporary, 12,000 seats, demountable, probably again going to Rio to be reused. Velodrome, probably, well, my favorite building, fantastic building, really efficient, cable net roof, lowest embodied carbon per square meter, I think, of any other stadium in the world, certainly any velodrome. Very lightweight, very smart design. Sustainable targets drive smart design in our view. So, would this have happened and if we had not had that BREEAM Excellent target? Possibly, possibly not. I'd like to think not. Timber panels just dropped into the cassettes, just dropped into the cable net, very safe to build, no temporary works, very quick, very efficient. Fantastic building. As you can see, I'm rather fond of it. That was last spring. And we actually put some bikes on it. Sir Chris Hoy, first person to ride around it on the Siberian Sustainable from FSC sources, larch. Siberian larch? Or pine? Larch. So the village, well, it's a very big residential development, but it's all permanent. So it's there for, and it will be leased on various tenures of social housing for local residents and for new people coming into the area. It's just about complete now. This is the landscaping, some pretty reasonable landscaping. All the water's recycled and reused. We have black water recycling, so we take wastewater out of the sewerage system, we treat it, we pump it around the site to contribute to our 40% recycled water target. We only use recycled water for irrigation, and we use it for toilet flushing as well. So don't use drinking water where you don't need it. And recycled wastewater is very, very easy to develop now. So, the learning legacy, coming to that. We thought it was a good idea to write down some of the things we did, good and bad, and to make them available to others. And so we worked with a lot of other organizations, including some universities, Imperial College and others, and we developed this thing called the ODA Learning Legacy. It's on that website. There's about 200 papers, articles, pamphlets, leaflets, trying to set out what we did. It's not all written by us. It tries to provide the lessons learned, how we did it, how we might have done it better, how it could be done better. This is a stepping stone. This is not the end game. So it's I think, a reasonably good example of what can be done in terms of new development. We had lots of good people, we had great teams, and we had the support, the political support to do it differently and better. But this is one step along the way. Next time it can be done even better again, and buildings have to get more efficient and more sustainable for the reasons that other speakers have said, and I won't go on about. But I think this did show that it was quite possible to set challenging standards and exceed them. Thank you very much.